Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Fleeting Thoughts, an altered TCG podcast, part of the Maindeck podcast family. I'm Dan.
And I'm Jordan, and today we'll be continuing our lore series with the Ordis faction today. Lawyers, scholars, scribes, you excited, Dan? All kinds of bureaucracy.
Folks, generals, soldiers. I actually, so Ordis are the currently in the like starter deck metagame. Ordis are kind of the top dogs as far as win rate. Very popular faction. A lot of people. Ordis was actually the second faction that I played, Jordan, back at Gen Con when you and I played it.
And it sure was.
I
played
recall,
Lyra that match, and there was a lot of dudes on the field against stuff that I couldn't play.
I think you played Bravos, and I'm pretty sure you played Bravos.
Oh, no, yeah,
in that
I was
match.
Bravos. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
and you were gonna get
round.
the game, but I drew charge, and I charged you. I had this Joan of Arc charge turn, and you just couldn't beat that. You were like, how do you get so much? And you were like, you were going wild at that point. Yeah, what a fun time when we were just like experiencing Altered for the first time. And now it's old hat. Everybody, we've seen it all. We know it. It's boring. I say it before the set even comes out.
I was just going to say, we're on the cusp of the most exciting thing. I actually have my uncut sheets that I haven't looked at, actually. I looked at them when I unpacked them, but they're a little curled from being in the packaging, and I have them flat out to get flattened before I like decide what I'm going to do with them. So I'm like waiting, and I've been wanting to look at them, but I'm like, I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait and let it drip feed a bit, and then I'm going to give in probably sometime this weekend because I don't work for the holiday, so I'm going to have a lot of time where I'm just like looking across there and be like, I could look at the rest of the set. It's right there. It's on those pieces of paper.
If you could have a little microphone, a spy mic set in Jordan's room, you would just hear constantly, "Yo, this is Pog.
Look at this! Oh my god!"
Yeah. I'm really pumped. I'm really pumped. I know that listeners, these podcasts, look, straight up, these are not the most exciting podcasts in the world. I think a lot of our initial listener base waiting for the game to release or looking for our our hard-hitting gameplay commentary. But I do think we're sticking this out and we're finishing it out because I do think this series is going to be a nice thing just to have in the books for the player base that ends up finding the game later and they want to dig in and they can see like we cover every faction lore wise, so they can dig into their favorites. So I think it's gonna be good to have. And I think right now it's just a period of all of us just kind of waiting impatiently for the game to finally get in our hands. So just, I guess, stay strong, listeners, a little bit longer. We're going to get there.
Yeah. Pretty soon.
Yes. Jordan, today we are talking, as you said, about Ordis. And before we get into, we're gonna cruise right on in. We're gonna get right to the meat of things. Before we do, I just have to mention really quickly, if you guys do enjoy Fleeting Thoughts, an altered TCG podcast, and all of our other podcasts in the Maindeck podcast family, you can support us freely by just interacting with the video here, like, comment, subscribe to the channel. If you're listening on a podcast platform, give a 5-star rating there. I know also we've had issues getting the podcast up on to propagate onto the podcast platforms in a timely manner. And I have to say, actually, as of releasing this video, my hope is that it is permanently fixed with a new solution that is going to greatly speed up the process that all happens at. I'm really excited for it. I've been working on this in the background a little bit, so I apologize for that, but I think it'll be smooth sailing from here on out. So thank you all so much for your support. And if you think that's worth a 5-star rating or a like or a comment, you can go ahead, drop it down there. Really appreciate that. Thank you all so much for the support in all the ways you can. Now, Jordan, why don't you kick us off?
Yes. So today we're going to be talking about Ordis. Now, Ordis, as their name would almost imply, because it's very close to order, is they're a very organized, very orderly faction.
What a coincidence.
Their philosophy is on justice. The notion of justice is basically the core of all of their belief systems and why they have lawyers and military as their kind of, forefront of their careers, their organization. They have knowledge bases, scribes. They have lecture halls. All these great things, as you would imagine from someone who loves order. We'll get into this a little bit later, but I just want to touch on it now because it's the thing that kind of floored me the most as I dove into the lore, which is this faction is actually a hive mind, which normally when you think of hive minds and other things, they're the faction that have like not a whole lot of order. They're generally some race that just is instinctual. They're trying to kill or eat everything. But in this one, the hive mind is the super orderly construct of law and justice, which I find is a really neat like coin turn on you. I found that fascinating.
I thought it was really interesting too, reading that, especially because I do know, I remember, Jordan, back at the Gen Con presentation when they were kind of like really quickly going over the factions, they presented Muna and Ordis at the same time. And they sort of told us that, these are two factions that are both kind of about order in their own ways. The Muna kind of being more about like natural order and maintaining the status quo through adaptation, even. And Ordis being more about like, I guess, I don't know, like creating or artificial order or subjecting order in a way. That kind of sounds negative, but like the idea of just like building an ordered society. And it's interesting that they even went so far when creating this lore as to have both factions have a sort of a mental connection feature to them, with the Muna with the Skein and then the Ordis with the Gestalt. And I think that is just kind of it's kind of a neat way to kind of put it showed that their similarities in some ways, even though they ultimately have very different approaches to things.
Yeah, very much so. I also think it's funny that they're a little bit different in the way their hive mind, if you will, works. Like Muna are very long distant. They connect to the skein like for long distances to everyone, versus the Gestalt, which is very short range to the point. Again, we'll get to it a little bit later, but they have to build what are essentially like radio towers on the forefront of the expeditions before the Ordis can deploy their troops, because they become highly susceptible to loneliness because they get so used to being connected with everyone and around them constantly that when they break their connection when they're long distance, they become extremely lonely and isolated really quickly, and the morale like dives, which again it always reminds me of like in other games and lore bases with hive minds, where instead of like loneliness they get subject to like losing their control completely. Like Tyranids come to mind. When they're out of the synapse, they just become like animals and they don't do anything. They just do whatever. Versus when they're
Tyranids from the Warhammer universe.
40K, yeah.
For people who aren't aware. Yeah, that's I also thought like maybe funny isn't the right word, but I did get a bit of amusement thinking about how when they get out of range, they just get really, really sad. Like, and, I just imagine them going, "Oh, where'd all my friends go?"
Yeah.
And and like but I get it. Like it's a morale defeating thing, and like to them, it's almost like it's like a drug. You just get so used to having this connection everywhere that it goes away, and it's like maybe like just a deafening silence that is hard to ignore. So
yep, and as we'll get into later, we'll just get into it later about some of the other aspects of the Gestalt. So we'll move on to their organization. We talked a little bit about it before, but as you'd expect from a super structured hive mind, if you will, they have what they call the tetrarchy. I think I pronounced that right. But yeah, the hierarchy in Ordis is a rigid, pyramidal, perfectly structured tetrarchy where they have a small council consisting of 3 dignitaries from each faction and then a representative of the people. And they call this council the 4 years, regardless of their social organization, which I thought was an interesting name. I guess each one represents like a year of thought. No.
I think it's I think that's maybe a slight misreading. So the Tetrarchy is a small council of 3 dignitaries of the faction, and then they are all and to those there is a representative of the people added. And that representative of the people is called to that position for 4 years.
Oh, I thought the position itself was called the 4 years, and I was like, maybe they're only able to be in the position for 4 years. Okay, that
So
makes more sense. Gotcha.
Yep. So it's 3 dignitaries, and it doesn't say anything, I don't think, of their their tenure, how their term, how long they stay there. They might just be lifetime dignitaries, the 3 of them, and then the 4th is a rotating. Every 4 years they elect. I guess the people elect a new one or something. Basically like an American president or something, um, who represents the people on this council, the Tetrarchy. So they have sort of they basically have a combination of like a democratically elected, person, and then three people who they're perhaps by their own merit or something, their position in the deeper political sphere. I guess I'm not entirely sure about that.
Yeah, and just throwing my own stuff here. This is not in the story, so no one quote me. But my guess is because they kind of have 3 major focuses. I'm assuming the 3 dignitaries. One is probably a militaristic-minded one. One is probably a knowledge-based one, and one is probably a law-based one. Because that's kind of like their 3 things. They have a big military, a big, library with a bunch of scribes and scholars, and then they have their huge law arm. So my assumption is the 3 dignitaries, again, this is only my personal the thought here, is it's probably one from each of those pillars of identity that represented, would be my guess.
Yeah, we like to make stuff up on Maindeck Family podcasts in general. So yeah, sure. I mean, I think that would make sense. That would be a very logical way to do it. Actually, I will say that honestly, maybe this is boring for some people, but this is one section of the lore I was kind of interested to hear more about. Like, I want to know more about the in-depth workings of their exact kind of political structure, especially because of how like it's a combination of democratic processes and maybe more like autocratic or something, or bureaucratic, or I just kind of want to see how does that all work, how does this all flow together, and like right now, are the Tetrarchy well regarded? Like, in other political systems in the world, we don't always regard our politicians very highly at all. Um and so, like, is this a sort of utopian Tetrarchy where we really like everyone, and then we all vote for 100% of the vote is like, yeah, this one person should be the voice of the people for 4 years, and everyone's happy? Or is there some dissonance in what we're experiencing here? I don't know. I'd love to hear more about that.
For sure, for sure. It definitely raises questions, and we'll get to that a little later, because in one of the stories, I have
Oh,
a
that's a good.
question specifically about how something came to be, or how a certain person was able to do certain things. But
Yeah.
moving along as far as the organization, so the way they'll do it is this council will generally have long sessions of debate and trying to basically get to the bottom of how to fix the issue at hand, whether it's a political, social, or economic projects, and they define those, they find the issues, they need to be addressed and resolved in a, what you'd expect to be a long and timely manner. Once they come up with solutions, then it'll go to a popular vote, and that will decide, that's the final decision of whether it gets turned into an official decree or whether it gets invalidated and kind of thrown out as, needs to be worked on. So that's how the organization and the way they function are, which leads us into their alteration style. Their alteration style is called the Heka, and given they like to have everything written out, the way it works is they make glyphs, and the glyphs turn the words and intentions in those words into reality. The first thing that popped to my head is, for those who may not be familiar, but Full Metal Alchemist. They always have to draw these big, like, runic circles to cast their abilities, and that's very similar. So they would put a word or a symbol that represents a word or sentence of words, and that would cause whatever it's attached to represent that, which is very interesting and very thematic for what they do.
In one of the stories, one of the we'll go through later, one of the heroes does that. They do a circle and it creates these like stone pillars or whatever, and exactly what I thought of too. I like immediately jumped to Full Metal Alchemist, and I was like, yeah, it's like that, yeah, because there's, yep, it just resonated.
Yep. And among that, with their style, because of what it does, this is actually how the Gestalt, their hive mind, is formed. So unlike Muna, where there is this, you know, big epiphany occurrence that kind of just turned people on, if you will, in the Heka, it is a deliberate hive mind. So they believe, wanting to get to the bottom of it, wanting justice, wanting knowledge, the best way to do it is to pool it all together. And the way they are actually initiated into Ordis is after a long process of examinations, both written and performed. They go through what is the word they use? Basically, they become a novice, and they go through a bunch of exams, chaining. They become an initiate. Once they finally pass all these tests and they have their experience quota, if you will, then they can actually become an actual Ordis. And the way they do that is they accept a specific glyph representing the monolith, which is one of their famous places we'll get to later. It's a diamond, and once it's imbued onto their body, it's infused with the Gestalt, and that's actually how they open up. It says they actually have to declare their individuality to fade, so they basically give up their individuality to join the collective. And once that happens, then they get connected with everyone else. It even says that you can share what you saw from your eyes with other people as well, which leads into the justice. Part of the reason they want that is because then, kind of like you were saying before, like, I have to believe that it is something that everyone, like the people that are voted on, are getting the vote of the people truly, and they do support them because you're connected with everyone. You hear everyone else's thoughts. You know what they're thinking. You know what they've seen. So like it'd be pretty easy to find out if someone was a bad actor because you're just like, oh, I saw you kicked an orphan yesterday. I don't want to vote for that guy. I know what he's done.
There's this brings up an interesting question I have about one of the stories, though.
And I think
too.
It's probably the same question I have.
Yeah.
So.
We'll get to it. There is some intrigue to talk about here. So
yeah. It doesn't specifically say here. So I'm wondering if maybe it's something that they still have control over, like they can pick and choose what is shared with the collective. But then it kind of defeats the purpose of the collective a little bit, because then it's the same as, like, part of the reason they did it is because they want to know truths, and if you're able to hide stuff, then it's no better than just talking to someone. But
do you really want someone just seeing through your eyes all day whenever they want to? Like, what if you're looking up, like, what if you're on like an illicit website like StarWarsUnlimited.com or something, and they can see, like, Dan's not looking at Altered. Dan's looking at a different card. Like, I wouldn't want that. I gotta be able to keep some stuff on the DL. Like, that's I don't know about that.
Yeah, and then some other things about the Gestalt, which we've already mentioned, of course, is they're able to connect. It's a little short range. It goes over how the consequences of being cut off of the Gestalt is they get very, as Dan said, they basically just get really depressed. They get sad. Their sense of longing to get back just grows and grows and grows. And actually, I find it very close to something you said, which is it does seem like it's kind of like an addiction, like almost like a drug addiction. Like they get cut off because it specifically says they have an exacerbated sense of longing compounded by a terrible tear or tear. I can't tell. So it's because they're used to the reassurance and support and encouragement. They're even able to share emotional, like, feelings as well as words and information. So like it is basically just like you're drip fed this constant flow of stuff, and then it's turned off and you're like, I gotta have my fix. I need to be connected.
Yeah, no. It's like textbook withdrawal symptoms. It's you feel the exact opposite of what you felt on the Gestalt, on the substance or whatever, but magnitudes worse. And it's interesting that they all just elect to get drugged up and spy on each other all the time as well. It's like kind of a okay.
Yep. But it does come with some great benefits. Like it says, the shared pool of knowledge, you're able to learn things faster than you would have been otherwise able to do. When you become an alterer, you're able to achieve alterations that are much greater than a single person would have ever been able to do, because you're able to kind of combine your hive mind into one ability to make it happen at a greater power. So it definitely has its pros and cons, but overall it works for them, and that's what they're doing. And they have
this is why I'm in the Muna and not in the Ordis, though. You know,
exactly.
I can't handle that great power, great. It's not responsibility, but great risk or something. No, the cost is too great. I just want to be chilling with my sneezer shrooms.
Some of their iconic locations, starting off with the Sanctum, which it's funny that they don't have the monolith listed as a place, but the Sanctum is in the upper part of the monolith. The monolith is this huge floating diamond, it's like superstructure that floats above a city, which we'll get into next because it is one of their other iconic locations. But the Sanctum is this gigantic labyrinthian library with all kinds of knowledge, books, scrolls, and rolls. It's just this huge complex ziggurat that I believe at one point it says that it's shifting around all the time to make room for more stuff. There's a huge employment of scribes and different cohorts that have upkeep, and archivists that make sure things are where they're supposed to be and knowledge is maintained and everything is kept up. So it seems like a very impressive place, especially if you're into books. And it's something that I thought was funny, that it's very labyrinthian, because that plays into the hive mind. If you're part of the hive mind, it's probably extremely easy to navigate because you know exactly where you're going because you're tuned into what everyone knows about it. But if you were an intruder trying to find something, I could see you easily just getting lost and then being caught because you're not sure what you're doing. So like it's almost like a vault that keeps itself safe, because any intruders aren't going to be able to find their way to what they're looking for, and even if they do, they're not going to be able to find their way out.
That's a really interesting point. Because when reading this, I was thinking that it was kind of unusual. I felt that the faction of order and efficiency had this labyrinth of a library as the top half of their, with the anthill being the bottom half of the entire monolith. But as a defensive mechanism where the hive mind is kind of like the key to the puzzle, I think that's a really cool idea. I don't know if that's what they intended. I think that's awesome. That's a really sweet way of doing it.
Yeah, and they have recently started upgrading the technology, but not everyone is happy with the technology. They've worked with some Axiom engineers to install different Keylon powered presses and some lights and elevators and stuff, so they don't have to use manual ladders and candles. But it specifically says that some of them find the machines far too loud, and they end up basically dismantling them or shutting them down and replacing them with just like candles and regular stuff, because they like the which this is weird coming from them, but a lot of them say they like the tranquil, deafening silence as they study. But the second they're disconnected from the gestalt and they can experience true silence, they immediately get depressed, which is kind of funny. That they're like, we want silence. And then when they have true silence, they're like, no, give me everything else back, please.
You know, I think actually those are Muna agents that have infiltrated the Ordis, because that feels to me like a total Muna, like, nah, get this technology out of here. I'm totally fine. I just want to vibe and meditate with my books. Like those are secretly Muna agents that have infiltrated the monolith, I think.
Yep. And then, as you said, there is also the anthill, which is the bottom portion of the monolith, which is this, again, the superstructure basically holds an entire compact city within, where everyone, works, lives, goes about their day doing law and order. And, it's just this super impressive, there's markets, port areas, all that jazz. Basically everything you'd expect from a large city is compacted into this upside down pyramid creates the bottom of the monolith.
I think it's mostly just like cabinets, offices, law stuff. I'm just reading through this again, and I think like it's saying that it gets a little confusing. I feel like the way that it's written here, but the streets of Arcaster are where they have the markets and the ports and everything far below. But they're saying while you're in the anthill, because you can like just look down
Oh,
and you
you
can
can
see that
observe them.
city
Okay, I see. Yeah.
bustling underneath. Yeah. So really it's a triangle, an upside down triangle of a bunch of like courtrooms and offices and stuff. And then an upper half of the triangle of a big confusing Escher library.
Yeah,
And I think that's the basic idea here.
that is good. Yeah, that's correct. And then the last, which I find this next one kind of funny because it's not a location, but the next iconic location
Yeah,
is a
you're right. I
is
didn't
a
think about that at
pair
all.
of like huge airships. One of which is just lost. We don't know where it's at. It's gone. It got lost in the tumult somewhere. We don't know if it's destroyed or if it's floating around somewhere. Given the, my mind being in the Warhammer 40k space, I was like, they're gonna find it in one set and it's gonna be all infected with something and it's gonna be
Yeah.
like a space
Yeah.
Hulk.
Yeah. If there's one thing you can give me in an altered story, I want something was there and now it's gone and we have no idea what happened to it. I just want to lose stuff because once something is lost, it becomes the potential for anything. Anything could happen. It's Schrodinger's airship, and it's both perfectly normal and also filled with altered chimera tyrannids at the same time. And we will only be able to know what its state is once we can find it in the story. And I love that.
Yep, and these two airships are called Mandjet and Masektet, if I
Yeah,
pronounced that correctly.
you
So
did.
they're both
I
huge.
think
One was called the Day Baroque, and the other is the Night Baroque. Is their like nicknames for it, and they're basically these huge protector ships that just kind of patrol the peninsula and protect it from tumultuous flows and creatures that sometimes ride on the tumult currents. And
that
it's They also state that it's not uncommon to see the silhouette as sharp as an arrow piercing through the clouds as it casts its huge shadow on landscapes below.
that
But
word is bark. By the way, it's bark. It's like a ship.
oh, okay. I thought it was Baroque.
Nope, there's no O in there.
Yeah,
If it
there's
had
no
an
O. You
O,
are
you're so
correct.
close though. If there
Yeah.
was a little O in there, you would have nailed it, Jordan. You would have. By the way, we had a comment on the last video about pronunciation things, and I absolutely welcome pronunciation corrections. I know I don't get them all right. I don't get them right all the time, but Jordan and I go way back, and we just he reads kind of fast. He reads a little faster than he should when he's trying to get through some of his words sometimes. And he mixes letters up a little bit, and we just like to have a little fun talking about it. So we do not. I swear, Jordan doesn't like secretly hate me because I keep correcting
Dan
his
abuses me
pronunciation.
and keeps me in the closet when I'm not filming. Help. No, I'm just kidding.
No, it's a bunch of sometimes words in other languages, sometimes words in fake languages. It's just a bunch of nonsense sometimes, and we're just both doing our best here. So sometimes I throw a little correction in.
Yeah. But so the huge airships, one is just completely gone, and that's the Mesquite. I keep feel like I'm pronouncing it wrong, but that is how it is spelled.
Mesectet.
Mesectet.
I
Then it
think
was lost in the tumult. The other one, the Manjet, is here, but during the big kerfuffle that caused the Mesectet to get lost in the tumult in the first place, Manjet was also heavily damaged by a huge Leviathan, which is Singula.
it was Singula, who was from the Bravos? No. Which stories was
Yeah, I believe
Singula
it was
in?
Bravos. I think it was
Was it Bravos?
yeah, because
It just
that's where
feels
she
like it
found
was
the
so
Oni.
much more
Because
recent
after
than
that, in
that.
the cage.
Yeah. I think that was Singula. Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, Singula is the big like space centipede, I believe.
I believe so, yeah. Unless
Which
it's
is
unless it's
my
a
favorite
close
one.
name, and we're both just like off base. But
I'm
either
pretty
way,
sure that's it. But
when Singula attacked, it heavily damaged the airship. So now it's currently said to be undergoing repairs in the shipyards of Sandraka, soon to be ready to join the rediscovery endeavor.
I like the story. I like the lost ship. I like Singula appearing again. I kind of just want to. First of all, there's got to be a card of Singula at some point, and that sounds really dope.
I like
Singula is
big
really cool.
centipedes. It's gonna be sick. I
Yeah,
hope it's just balling.
you lived with a lot of big centipedes.
Oh no,
a
I'm
year or
not
two
those.
ago.
I don't like those centipedes. Oh no, I understand that they're good for your house, but I hate them. I don't know what it is. I boiled it down. Maybe I
No,
just
they're
don't like things that are just uncomprehensibly fast and can
yeah.
crawl on walls. Because I do, if they moved slow, I would probably not have as much of a problem. But the fact that they're, fun fact, for body length to speed, it is the fastest creature on the planet for its
Okay.
body length, because it
Wow.
moves like its body length. Like, I forgot what the number was, but like the amount of body length, its own body length that can move in a second is the fastest speed for any creature. Like, if we can move that fast, we would, it'd be insane. Like, they are insanely fast for their size.
Okay, so this is going out to the altered team. I know a few of you are going to listen, which I appreciate. So I also hate most bugs in real life. I don't want to deal with them, but for some reason, I love fantasy bugs. Like I love bug Pokemon in Pokemon. I like they're really cool. I love fantasy spiders. I hate real life spiders. But when we get Singula, or if you guys are writing some more Singula lore, can we take this really cool fact Jordan just gave us and apply it to make it a giant light speed space centipede who just like
It
laser
depends on the
zaps
species,
through
though,
ships?
because that's a house centipede. If it's like the
Okay, well,
classic centipede that I'm probably imagining in my head, the venomous one that's really mean and you don't want to get bit by,
yeah.
those are not nearly as fast.
Okay,
But if it's a
but
house
this is
centipede,
a it's a chimera centipede. It can be anything. It doesn't it make it really fast. It'd be cool. Piercing holes through ships. Like, whoa, singular. Like, I think that'd be sick. Okay, sorry. Total
yeah,
distraction.
yeah. Back
Current
on,
objectives
yeah, the
of the
current
Ordis.
objectives, which I feel like there's only really one here, because the first one that they mention is the Gestalt, but it doesn't actually say anything that remotely like attaches to an objective. It just gives us more information about how the Gestalt functions and tells us that this is where it tells us about the short range, and that they have to, have like a forward group that builds the tower, like basically the radio tower, so they can connect with their family back home. But that's less of like an overarching objective and more just like a military mission that would be used. They
I
send
I
Axiom engineers ahead of time to like build a tower so they can send their Ordis teams in, which again isn't really like an objective that I would think of, like if a country objective, if you will. That just seems not really like an objective and more just like
yeah.
a utility in their,
It's
like,
a part of their operations, right? I think
yeah.
what they're saying here, I think you're right. This does feel like a different objective than what a lot of the other factions were given. But I think what they're getting at here is that there's a weakness to the Ordis Gestalt, and their objective, I think what they're saying here is to try and address that weakness. And so one of the ways they're doing that is working with Izmir and Axiom fabrication to create S-bars, which are these beacons that these antenna basically. Um, and maybe there will be some other ways or stuff, but I think it's just kind of pointing out, like, yeah,
So you're
as
saying they're a
they,
cell phone company?
I'm saying you're gonna have to sign up for O Mobile service in order to get your Gestalt to not be roaming all the time. Um, no, but I think that's, ultimately when we're talking about the Expeditionary Corps and their journey into Kaer Urun and then beyond into the unknown, unexplored regions, they have a weakness that other factions don't quite have, in that they're all reliant on this connection, this relatively short range connection to other people. And the whole point of the Expeditionary Corps is literally, we're going to leave. And like leaving
Yep.
is how you go away from people, right? So it doesn't work super well. So I think that's really what they're getting at with that objective.
For sure. And the next objective is the ancient civilizations. So with this one, as you'd expect, in their branch of scholars and scribes, there's a huge section of history. They like to look back at the history to kind of make sure, the time old tale, you got to study the past to make sure you don't repeat its mistakes. And that's kind of what they're doing. Also, because this crazy thing called the confluence happened, and they really want to know how the world functioned before all this crazy tumult happened, because so much has been lost to time and merged with the imaginary, and they really want to figure out what it was like pre-confluence, partially because a lot of them hold the idea that we want a place without the tumult where there isn't randomness. Essentially, they want a hard, cold, constructed, stable environment, and the best way to do that is to kind of study the past, to be like, well, how did they do it back when things were stable? How can we get back to that stability? So studying ancient civilizations and old artifacts to kind of uncover that truth is one of their biggest drivers as well.
Yep. That's yeah, I mean, I think that's obviously a good idea for our current history. It's a good thing that we like to do. It's why historians are so important to have. And we do see some more of the studying of ancient civilizations in one of these later stories as well, being kind of an important one of our hero stories really makes a point about how important it is to bring this up. So I was like, when they, in the hero stories, they kind of directly address some of their objectives as well.
Yep. And speaking of that, that brings us to our hero stories now. That is the last bit for the general overview of the faction.
Yeah, and I am going to be kicking off our stories today. Like last week, I'm going to read two of them. Jordan's going to get one of them. We're going to do our best to kind of keep these a little brief. Again, there's the full stories on altered.gg, and you can read through and get all the juicy details there if you want. This is going to be the brief summation of each of these stories. I'm going to start with Sigismar and Wingspan. Now, Sigismar and Wingspan is the starter deck hero, and the kind of the first one that people got used to, and the first one that people started kicking butt with, because it's pretty widely regarded as just a generally strong hero in the game who has the ability to just put out Ordis soldier recruits for free every turn. Sigismar and Wingspan's story is it's a story about basically overcoming one's heritage, I guess, when you have a heritage that doesn't weigh on you, or that weighs on you in sort of a negative way, I guess, that doesn't look good on you, basically. So Sigismar, as a child, grew up having to deal with basically this stigma that Sigismar's lineage traced back to an old Kuningas. We're going back again to some of our Bravos lore, which is really exciting. Ixus is my best guess at the pronunciation of this. Ixus or Ixus, I'm not totally sure. I don't know. I think that Y is really calling to me. I think I'm going to call it Ixus. Ixus, the third Kuningas of Isgartha, who is infamous, present in all the history books, but not in a good way, because Ixus had started out and was chosen to be the Kuningas because of his moral platitudes and his benevolent nature, and at some point just turned his regime into pure tyranny, became an absolute despot, and was just being terrible, shedding blood abundantly, persecuting inhabitants of the Protectorate. And that wasn't really well regarded. At this point, people don't look back and think, what a cool guy. They think, what a bad guy. Now, Sigismar's father is a politician and managed to basically take his family bloodline, take his ancestry, and sharpen it into a weapon. Got into the political game by almost threatening people with his with his intimidation and deception due in part to his bloodline, repeating that people like him had a purpose. They were necessary for a political system to endure. He had to be there kind of poking and prodding at the system, threatening, kind of using maybe underhanded methods to get his way based on his bloodline, because without it, then things would maybe stagnate. Things would become complacent and not progress. But Sigismar was never comfortable with any of this. And as a child, he was mocked, teased, was not, or was avoided more likely, more commonly, because nobody wanted to be friends with the kid whose dad was kind of a jerk and whose ancestor was a really, really bad person. So that, kind of sucked. But Sigismar really wanted to change this. And Sigismar did eventually kind of grow cold and vengeful, but had a tutor, an instructor named Kadri, who took him under his wing, and who was a great teacher. One thing I love about this lesson is the influence that nurture can have on a child, right? This idea that this child was born into not great circumstances. I mean, like wealth-wise, they were a very wealthy family, but was basically set up to become yet another abuser of authority and a bad figure ultimately. But this instructor Kadri believed that all children were blank slates basically, and had the ability to become anything as long as they were nurtured correctly. And Kadri helped Sigismar understand that he didn't have to be tied to his past. He could be in control of his future. He wasn't condemned to repeat the mistakes of his ancestors. Kadri taught him the basics of alteration. I mean, he learned everything. He was a wealthy kid. He learned whatever. But Kadri did teach him the basics of alteration, which is, in essence, changing the world, which is what Sigismar wants to do desperately, wants to change his future. Sigismar masters this power, and eventually, gets to finally also master some control over his own feelings and emotions and touch inner peace. Right. So, he kind of comes to peace with everything, and comes to peace with his position in the world and his father's position, and realizes upon hearing about it that this rediscovery endeavor, this is the place. This is where you can go out and you can be a person separated from everything, all of your past, all of your actions, and whatever you do while you're out there, while you're far away from everyone, that's just going to be you. That's your result, the fruits of your labor, and your actions there are what matter the most. So he leaves. He joins the rediscovery endeavor, enlists with the Ordis, pursue a military career, dreaming of nothing more than being at peace and being anonymous and existing and having his own life. But while he's stationed on the rampart, he gets summoned to his colonel, and it's none other than his dad, who says, "My boy does not need to be here, and I have worked out a deal with the higher ups, and he's gonna leave now, and there's nothing you can do about it." Sigismar obviously wasn't excited about this. No one was excited about this. And as he was disgruntled and heading back, packing up, getting ready to go, the alarm bells ring. There's an attack on the rampart. There are chimera everywhere attacking, and he grabs his stuff and just goes, and there's a fight, a big fight. These griffins getting torn out of the skies. A griffin tumbles to the ground, and Sigismar approaches it, realizes that it has a swollen and lacerated abdomen, and sees that this chimera was actually pregnant. A griffin type chimera pregnant with, and he opens up and guess what? It's another griffin. It's a little tiny griffin. That's how it works when you give birth to something. So he takes the little baby griffin out of his, it's like kind of an honestly gruesome scene, takes it out of the chimeric mother's stomach, and um, basically just raises it along with the rest of the Expeditionary Corps, because after seeing this chimera and getting congratulated for his efforts, the commander, I believe, or the colonel or something, Singh, asks him to join the exploration forces. Gets asked to join the exploration forces. The admiral, here it is, by Sigismar, and the admiral grants it on the spot, in creating a diplomatic tug of war between his father and the Expeditionary Corps leaders. But eventually, they just had to relent because Singh was higher up in the chain than his father was. So he ends up getting to join the Expeditionary Corps, raises this griffin who he names Wingspan, who becomes a mascot, a favorite of the Expeditionary Corps, and the Aegis High Command gets asked by Sig if Kadri, his old instructor, can come join and keep training him. He also gets trained by Joan of Arc, Bedivere, Robin Hood. He becomes just a great commander, a great leader, the admiration of his peers, and he finally can look at himself in the mirror, considered exclusively for who he is and not for what his backstory was. But it ends with letting everyone know that Sigismar is still dreaming of shedding light on his ancestor Aexis's actions. What he really wants to do in this Expeditionary Corps is when they get to Caer Uran, he wants to see, are there still books, stories, things that were abandoned when he had to leave that could tell us more? Again, looking at history, like what happened to Aexis, because Aexis started out good and then turned. And Sigismar is worried. Is that going to happen to him? And listeners, I'm going to leave you with an interesting thought on this story. What if he doesn't find out? And what if there is something that will inevitably happen to him? He is a great commander, but what if he becomes a great villain in the series at some point too? That would be really interesting and really cool. But for now, it's a great story about overcoming one's what seems to be one's destiny and creating your own. So that's the story of Sigismar.
All right, very good story. I liked it a lot. I liked the fact that his ancestor is basically just a tyrannical overlord at the end of his life.
Yeah, we all like that. Why wouldn't you like that?
Yeah, I feel like it's going to be a cool, like you said, a cool leaf for later and future set.
Yeah, I feel like there's plenty of potential here. I feel like the Ordis have some of the most just like they seem to have a lot of potential for bad actors within the faction compared to some of the other. Like, I mean, Lyra had just like pure chaos. Like, who knows what Nevenka is up to or whatever. But like some of these other ones, it felt like the Muna were all like, yeah, they're all like really, really chill and really good. And the Ordis are kind of like, yeah, some of them kind of suck, So I'm interested to see what comes of this in the future.
All right. So the next story I will be covering is Waru and Machiavelli, or Mack. So the story opens up with Waru walking through the Peregrine Museum. He has has special privileged access, given he is a prominent patron and donor of the gallery. It is a museum. He frequents it all the time. He's a big, proponent of a lot of the things that are inside. It just kind of shows him casually walking around, and then it flashes back in time, back to when he was a younger lad. So back in the day, he was, big into political and history sciences. He was a student at the Acaster University, and he had we'll call him a frenemy. A friend that was basically a rival. Think of your favorite anime where they have the classic rival character that's a friend at the same time. And they kind of go back and forth and push each other to make sure that they keep being the best that they can be. They're always outdoing each other. And then after the day ends in school, they'd meet at this tavern and just kind of exchange. It literally says they exchange words like swordsmen exchanging blows. Kind of they have their little debates at the end of the day, and then once the debate is over, they just have a good time, talk about other random stuff together, and drink and eat meals. And that's what he did in his youth. They both were vying to be the best at the university. And when he enrolled in his political curriculum is when he was gifted Machiavelli, or Mack, which is a stoat, a chimera looking like a stoat, which is the little white stoat you'll see on his shoulder, wearing his little vest. But anyway,
they call it an ermine. Are stoats and ermines the same thing?
Ermine is a species of stoat.
Ah, okay. See, look, Jordan is the stoat master. I am certainly less skilled than Jordan at animal identification.
But yeah, so he was gifted the chimera, named Machiavelli in honor of the distinguished pre-confluence thinker, the philosopher. So as they were getting to know each other, he'd accompany him everywhere he went. He would curl up in his robes during lectures and doze off on the table while he studied. And then rummage around finding florets and bring them back in his mouth to pay for the next round of drinks and food for the merriment of all the students. It never actually says where he found these florets, so he probably took them from the students that he ended up buying stuff for, but
that's what I thought too.
And then it goes along to say that, when he was young, he had an appetite and a pride, and him and his buddy would continually, as they got older, continue their debates, but things started to get more and more heated as they got older, and their worldviews and their political views started to kind of separate. But it never quite got to the point where they couldn't be friends. They would always still, at the end of the day after the debate, just talk about regular pleasantries, until one day. One day the debate got too heated, and the debate specifically was about whether or not they should be, as a faction, focusing on leaving Arcaster. Maru held staunch that they have everything they need here. They just need to uncover the artifacts and figure out what happened in ancient times, kind of rebuild the pieces of the puzzle. However, his friend Avkin, if I pronounced that correctly,
yeah, probably
had an opposite view. He said that no, we need to be venturing out. We need to find artifacts elsewhere to help complete this puzzle. We don't have all the answers that we need. We need to leave. We can't just stay here forever. We have to leave. We have to venture out. And they just had a huge heated discussion until it got to the point where Waru left and was literally like, I can't be friends with this man anymore. He has gone too far. He's off the deep end. I can't talk to him. He's stubborn and he is wrong. So he continually does this, and he starts to become vocal about it, especially at the graduation, where he found him to be a little disingenuous during his valedictorian speech, because he did not become valedictorian, but instead his arch rival now, Avkin, did become valedictorian. And during this speech, he was a little hypocritical, saying all kinds of, a little, to use a word here, fluffy. He was being very optimistic, even though Waru, having talked to him and debated him, was like, he's not optimistic at all. He's one of the most pessimistic people I know. He doesn't know what he's talking about, and he started becoming a very vocal opponent towards his once friend. And of course, after they have graduated, now they go into the workforce and they start climbing political ladders. Avkin starts, being, I think at one point it says he has a meteoric rise in the ranks as he's going up. People are liking what he has to say. People are like, yeah, we need to leave. Well, Maru is staunchly, doing everything he can to hinder his once friend in his climb to the top. And at one point, he kind of, he doesn't fully throw in the towel, but at some point he's just like, you know what, whatever. I'm throwing in the towel. I'm going to go do my thing. And that's when he starts curating the museum and working really hard to find artifacts and sticking to his guns, where he was like, no, we can find all the answers we need right here. And, we don't need to leave. He continually does this until some people are getting very disgruntled with Avkin and his ideas. And Avkin's starting to get dangerously close to being elected I think it's pronounced Basilius. When I looked it
Sure.
up, the word is like a Greek leader, similar to like a king, if you will. So he's dangerously close to becoming elected, and his what are the words? Dissonance are wanting to stop it at all costs, and they know that Maru is a very vocal opponent, and Maru is also quite highly respected in both the political and educational spheres. So they kind of come to him and they're like, hey, we need your help. We have all these people that want to fight against this, and people know you. You can pull strings. You can help us. And he says, you know what? I'm not throwing in the towel yet. It's time to come back. And he says yes. And he starts helping in very interesting ways, such as spying, gathering information, forming plots. And this is one of the questions that I think both me and Dan have. I'm assuming it's the same thing, is if they did have this hive mind, how is he able to start making these plots without everyone knowing that he has these plots against who's, supposed to be the king? And how can plots even exist when everyone knows what everyone's thinking at all times?
That's why I think there has to be some amount of consent to
Yeah, like
what
there
is
has to be,
happening.
because
There
otherwise
has to be.
there couldn't
has
be
to be.
this political intrigue and sneakiness going on this side. So they continue, they try, but Avkin always seems to be one step ahead. No matter what plot they have or what information they have, what thing they spring, it does slow him, but he always steadily keeps rising. And he eventually does, to everyone's dismay, get elected. And they have lost their war, if you will. They weren't quite able to get what they wanted. They weren't able to get him, not necessarily thrown out, but they weren't able to get Maru in there. They weren't able to get him from being Bacillus. And he gets elected and starts his agenda to start the, big investment into the expeditionary force. And he's like, yeah, we got to leave. We got to get out there. We got to start making these towers. We need to leave our area. We're not staying here. We're uprooting. So he goes back to his museum, kind of, lost for words, and just like, man, I didn't get what we needed. And the guards of the museum kind of, give him a nod, and he goes through and he kind of rests his shoulders and takes his mask off for the day and just kind of starts drinking it all in when his buddy and old friend Avkin enters, and they embrace each other. And turns out this has been a super long game con for the both of them. After that fated debate, Maru did think about it and thought, you know what? We need all the information we need to get. Not all the information is here. There are artifacts all over from the ancient era that are all over this land. We need to find them. So he and Avkin make a pact to have this huge elaborate plan where he will be a vocal opposition to him and secretly be helping him in the sidelines to make sure and help ensure that Avkin always knows what his opposition is thinking and what they're doing, so he can overcome it and make sure that they get what they want, which is to get the expeditionary force on the ground so they can get more artifacts and more information about the ancient world. And
this was cool as heck.
Yeah, I love this. When I was going on, I was like, man, this is a really weird story. And then at the end, when I was like, wait, whoa, it was all along, Con. This is sick.
Yeah, I became a huge Waru fan from this.
Same. And on top of it, he has a stoat, which makes it even better.
Yeah, I mean that it's a total it's a total turnaround in the last three paragraphs or whatever, last two paragraphs. It suddenly just twists everything, and you're like, holy cow! Yeah, okay. So he positioned himself this way so that he could get in the good graces of anyone who would be opposed to the rediscovery endeavor, so that they could make sure it happened and nothing would get in the way. What a cool idea. Yeah, that's awesome. Big fan.
Yeah, definitely
Political
a great
intrigue.
It was very good. I liked that one quite a bit.
Yeah,
which
great story.
Leads us to our last one, a name we've heard before in Bravos' individual story, but now we'll hear her story. Take it away.
So Gulrang and Tocsin, Gulrang being Kojo's sister, older sister by quite a bit, actually. It sounds like he was pretty young here when she was in her teens or something. This is going to be actually a pretty short story. Because I'm going to be skipping through it really quick, because This was kind of similar to last week's story about Teja and Naura. This is a story that really didn't have a lot of like major like twisty plot points. It was kind of just more about the details of training and getting into the Ordis and everything. So this is really a story about Gulrang, who is just a girl who grew up with parents who did stuff that she didn't really care about. Um, their parents made wood stuff, and she's not interested. Instead, they had a veteran from the Ordis who had come in, Venka, who would come in and stay for dinner and regale them with their war stories. He'd been fighting, he'd been injured fighting the tumult. He had a permanent limp, and he came in and he told old soldier tales to them all. And Gulrang's eyes lit up, and she just was like, "I that's the life for me. That's what I gotta have." Um, she begs and begs her parents to go, and eventually is like, "Look, I'll take care of everything. I will do everything right. I'll get up early. I'll go to bed late. I'll take care of Kojo. I'll do everything you need me to. You just got to let me join the Ordis." Um, and they relent and they let her. She trains really hard. She puts on muscle. She learns everything. She learns law. She learns Heka. She learns just whatever she needs to learn, to the point where when she finally gets to join the Ordis, she breezes through like record time, gets high ranking, just becoming a like not, barely even a recruit, but before she's already like a full on soldier and starts ranking up. Distinguishes herself, gets assigned to Asgarth's most perilous position, guarding the peninsula's borders against the tumult. She looks out from the rampart, sees the expanse of Kaer Uran. It's right, like she's right there. She's right there at the edge of the tumult. And as she's there positioned, there's an attack. Of course, as is wont to happen, where all these Chimera are coming in, they're flying in. And in fact, this same attack appears to be around the same time. This is answering a question, Jordan, that we had earlier on. Around the same time that a little what is it, tiger cat thing, fiery cat thing, washes up on in Kojo's lap. Basically, we were like, they didn't really talk. They said he found him. And that was the end of it. But here it turns out that he may have come from this very attack as well. So the tumult starts altering things, bringing chimeras, and these chimeras land nearby, and one of them infuses into a stone statue and comes to life. And there's all sorts of confusion, and Gulrang has rocks hurtling at her, and suddenly the golem reaches out and stops some wall rocks from falling on Gulrang, and she expected to die there, but actually this construct saves her. After the fight, they end up like caging up the construct, and she is desperate to figure out why it saved her life. But the thing is, it's rocks. It can't really talk. it doesn't have it doesn't have vocal cords. It's rocks. So she spends day in, day out time just trying to talk to this thing and just trying to understand each other, using like its breathing to kind of understand it.
It breathes
And
with a singular hole on its face.
yeah, it's got just a hole, and it just pushes air through it. And that's how she's trying. She's just trying her best to figure it out. And her superiors are watching, but they think, you know what, like if she can succeed, this could be a good source of information about the tumult, which we need. And we're Ordis. We don't turn down information at any point in time. So they let her kind of go at it. And one day she gets the best idea ever. She's like, here's a trumpet. She gives the trumpet to this statue right up to his little blowhole, and it goes, and it toots a big trumpet toot. And everyone thinks it's real funny, but you know what? That's it. It can do more with a trumpet than it can with its little blowhole. So there you go. They end up naming. She ends up finally naming it. He is named Tocsin. The golem is delighted. I assume he goes toot toot, toots his horn a little more because he's so excited that he was given a name. they finally decide, you know what, this creature isn't dangerous, and they allow it to leave its cell. And Ghoul is just like, shows him around Arcaster, invites him to the family home. They have dinner with the family and they laugh, and he goes toot toot. I'm embellishing a little bit here, but I'm sure that probably happened. And at the end of the day, they end up going through the Musubi, and they bond, and finally, they're able to start to understand each other a little bit more. And Gulrang just has this goal, like, I just want to converse with this thing. I want to understand it saved my life. I want to understand why. I want to know who it is. I want to share this life with it. And she's best friends with a bunch of rocks now. And they're gonna go join the Expeditionary Corps. So there you go. That's the story. No tragedy, just rocks and trumpets. A good time. Good time for everyone.
Yeah, I actually really like the story because I didn't realize the thing like on its shoulder, on Tocsin's shoulder, was a trumpet thing. And now just knowing that he just constantly has a big tuba on his mouth is just hilarious.
Yeah. He's a toot tooter. Is the toot tooter. I'm so excited. I'm really jacked because I have a Gulrang promo that I got from a previous event. And I also have really enjoyed some of the cards that we've had spoiled for Gulrang's super defensive play style.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be really obnoxious. People are going to get a little mad at me, I think, because I'm just going to make it really hard to advance all the time. And I get to do it while going toot toot the whole time. So it's even better now.
For sure. And so that kind of wraps up our 3 stories and our general overview. But we do have a viewer question as usual for the end of our lore videos. We've been following Nestor and Pilgrim had a lore question for each faction, and we've been answering those at the end of each episode. So today is just like all the rest. So our Ordis question today, Dan, is if we see a character in the future leave Ordis after they have gotten the glyph tattoo, do you think that they will still have access to the Gestalt?
No. Thank you all for watching another episode of Fleet. No, I mean, I don't actually. I really don't. My assumption is that when the word is no longer engraved, then the power, the access to the Gestalt would no longer be there. I could be wrong, but that's my guess, because I think that's all we can really do. What do you think, Jordan?
I think it will, because it doesn't say the glyph tattoo is removed, just that they leave Ordis after they've already gotten the glyph tattoo. So like they got the tattoo, and then later on they're like, the Ordis isn't for me, I'm out, peace.
I guess I just assumed that the tattoo would be removed. That it's like you're not.
There's like a ceremony where they take it off or something.
Yeah, they're a very by the books kind of like important. There's important steps to every process that you have to go through, and I would guess. I mean, maybe you're like, I'm going to leave Ordis and become a Lyra, and you just go la la la, and you just run away, and nobody. Nobody can catch you.
Yeah, my understanding is it would be like someone who just went rogue. Like they didn't like apply to be like, I'm leaving Ordis. They were just like, one day they're just like, I'm out of here, and they just book it.
What do you think though? Because if they still have access to the Gestalt, couldn't they be found that way then? Like, couldn't they be tracked down?
That leads me to the question we had in the story. Like, if there is some consent, they could just never consent again, but still have access, or they just have to walk far. They just have to walk across the street, and then no one can contact them anymore.
Can you become part of the deep Gestalt? It's like the deep web. It's like there's no connections to the people within the Gestalt there, but they're still there. They're still in it. Is there a deep Gestalt? I think that's my ultimate question. I think part of this really comes down to how. I mean, this is a question about how the Gestalt works, but I think Altered Crew, we need a Gestalt deep dive. Let's get the pens out, or the keyboards out. Let's get some more Gestalt information out there, because there are questions that need answering, and they are being given to you here on Fleeting Thoughts.
Because that also opens up, if you can put a mark that can turn on the Gestalt, since it's not something like Muna where it's like this weird innate like connection with your spirit and mind, it's a manufactured connection. So that then entails kind of like a computer that you'd be able to hack it. So you could put other modifying glyphs on it. Like maybe you can modify it in some way to do something. Like, is that also like these are answers we need?
Okay. This idea of like changing the words or add in letters or something to like hack the glyph.
Yeah.
That's a cool idea.
Maybe there's going to be a whole set based around like this underground society that like hack the glyph for their own gain so they can give like false positives. So they can be like, yes, I'm telling the truth under oath. And then other people will use the Gestalt and be like, open your mind. And they're like, okay, but it's a modified glyph. So it feeds them like a fake story, but they take it as true.
It's like, hold on. Jordan, did you ever play Netrunner?
I played the 1v1 card game very briefly at some point. I played like 5 to 10 games. You had it was all you were trying to, one person was a hacker, they were trying to hack into the corp, and the corp was trying to set up this ice that would get in the way of the hack, and sometimes that ice would be like a backfire thing, like they try to access your file thing and it's actually surprise, it actually blows up in your face and does meat damage to the hacker or whatever. Like those are actual terms from the game because it was ridiculous. But that is like you're basically giving that idea, like they're trying to access the Gestalt and surprise, it's like a Gestalt virus that like like blasts you back. Like there is so much that could be explored here. And I think I really love every time we go to these episodes, Jordan, you and I are both like, here's this crazy idea for a new set where the story goes off the rails. And like, I think that's really cool because like prior to this, I was just thinking, I don't really know what the story is going to be. I don't really care. I don't know. But now we've got so many cool ideas for plot points that I'm just excited to see what they come up with. For sure. But do you have any closing remarks before we close out this episode on Ordis?
We didn't really have a definitive answer to that question. I kind of think no. Jordan kind of thinks yes, but also hacking words is cool and stuff. So like, I don't know.
We have a tentative no and a tentative yes, but those no and yeses hinge on more details that have yet to be brought to light about how the Gestalt works specifically. Yeah.
My answer is Altered needs to answer the question with another lore. That's what we need. So, no, I think that's it. That is all we got for this one. We got one last lore dive episode for you people who have been patiently waiting through. Izmir is coming next week. We're going to close out the series at that point. Following that, we will be getting ready for Gen Con, and we will get cards in our hands, and we will start to be playing the full game more, and we will be having a blast. So things will be going right back to gameplay world with only minor lore, not lore dives, maybe just lore like wades.
Snippets.
Right? We're going to sips? Snippets. I was trying to go with the like dive, the dive theme, like thinking about it like a pool of lore. Like maybe we're just going to wade into the shallow end here and there, but we're really going to be talking more about gameplay. So until next time, dear listeners, thank you so much for listening. Jordan, I would love to have you sign our listeners off.
Will do. So as the day comes to a close, those were our fleeting thoughts. Thank you guys so much for listening and watching, and we will look forward to seeing you in about 2 weeks. Goodbye.
Bye, everyone.